So it's all for play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Hello, Aston Villa fans, and welcome to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. And we have a bit of breaking news. I put up a tweet this morning, half hoping that we would have some information today about something. Obviously, I'm not in the know. I'm pretty upfront on that. I just was craving some news, craving some transfer news, something that we can get our teeth stuck into. And then all of a sudden, David Ornstien pops up with an Ornstien bomb and basically lets us know that Aston Villa have bid for Toulouse centre-half that we've covered on this podcast before, JAYDEE Canvot. Don't know how to pronounce it. We will find out. I've heard two people pronounce it two different ways, which is interesting, which is really, really interesting because I think there's two discussion points on this. We now have some concrete information with regards to a bid going in. Bid hasn't been accepted. Actually, do you know what? Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the article from David Ornstien first. So Aston Villa make offer for Toulouse defender JAYDEE Canvot. Aston Villa have made an offer to sign the highly rated centre-back. The Premier League club has not been accepted by their League One counterparts, but talks continue amid interest from a host of suitors. Canvot turns 19 next week, broke into the Toulouse team in the second half of last season, making his first senior start away to Lens in early January, which he played actually really well in central midfield. He went on to make 18 appearances, and the France under-19 international is also able to play as a holding midfielder, as I mentioned there, and featured for his nation at the recent Maurice Ravello tournament, which is a pretty prestigious tournament, which they won in front of scouts from numerous European sides. Villa have already recruited teenage centre-halves this summer after the arrival of Xanx from Kasampasa, who signed a pre-contract in February. And then also it goes on here to say about the signing of Cisse, who will go back to Lask in Linz as well. So I haven't done a piece on Cisse, but just wanted to come on and do a piece here about Canvot. So young player, as I've mentioned, we've done a bit on him on the podcast, and since then I actually watched his first game against Lens. I watched subsequently the return fixture against Lens, where he played as a centre half, and I watched the game against Brest as well, along with Santien. So more and more I've been kind of getting up to speed with this guy and what he could potentially offer to the team. Now, I suppose, make a little caveat with regards to this. First of all, I completely understand he's 18. Completely understand he's inexperienced. That's one of the things that we discuss here. There is no complete diagnosis or complete scouting report or complete review on him currently because of the amount of minutes he has played, or the lack of the amount of minutes he has played. But Aston Villa have seen something in this guy. Aston Villa have prioritized youth in their defensive reinforcements that they've brought in. And much in all, as we may like to think that we want to have, there's going to be open heart surgery on this defense this off season. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. So we need to kind of just get that out there. First of all, we can hope for things, we can want things, but we have to obviously work in the realms of reality as well. And it looks like the opportunity here is that the club, for better or for worse, I'm not saying that they're right or they're wrong, but for better or for worse, the club are going to go primarily with Pau Torres, Tyrone Mings, Ezri Konsa, Xanx, and this guy, Axis at the back, somewhere along the line. And yes, there's a mixture of youth, but there's also a mixture of experience, and a lot of experience. And I think sometimes we underplay the experience, but it's up to those experienced guys in the likes of Pau Torres, the likes of Tyrone Mings, and the likes of Ezri Konsa to elevate their game even more. They're not dead. They're not out to pasture. They're not out to stud. They still have a lot more to contribute, and they need to elevate their game also. Okay, so just a caveat at the start, because I understand that some fans will be maybe a bit disappointed this guy maybe doesn't have name value. Will be a bit disappointed and see this as a PSR flip. not every signing we will make that's under the age of 20 years of age is going to be a PSR flip. Some of them actually have to be at some stage for tomorrow and for our future planning. But time will tell on that. So just want to kind of take this in the vacuum outside of that as to where this would stand should this come to pass in an Aston Villa backline. And I think that's important. Just important to kind of mention it. So, as the article mentioned, he's a France under 19 international. And what I've seen when I've looked at him is he's a really, really big, athletic, strong, rangy type player. He's quite aggressive for his age, as I've said in the last podcast. And, I think if there is one thing that our backline, and again, I completely understand he's not going to come in. I don't expect him to come in and usurp anyone, but he's there to learn for the next 12 months, next 18 months, and then potentially then put himself in a position to usurp somebody. And if he needs to come in, be utilized in the setup. But he's played in the back three, primarily with Toulouse. Again, something worth noting, considering that there is a lot of talk currently that Aston Villa are now going to swap to a back three. I've been the biggest proponent on earth with regards to moving to a back three. I've been talking about it since probably the era of Dean Smith, but properly I've been talking about it since about June 2023 when Unai Emery, when we had that offseason. I just had a feeling he didn't like our fullbacks. Not that he didn't like our fullbacks, but he wasn't comfortable with potentially playing them. And have to say that I was wrong in the next season, considering we got European football with playing that higher line. But the game of football has now changed, and with the offside rules and semi-automated offside coming in, I think you have to play the margins. The VAR aren't going to get it wrong, and that the linesman isn't going to get it wrong. So potentially there is potentially a move to a back three. I'm not all in it as a lot of other people, but I would definitely, me, I would very much be excited to see if it was to come in. So he's played in the back three. He's got experience of playing in central midfield. By trade, he was a central midfielder who's moved back. So he's pretty decent with his feet and short and intermediate distances. I'm going to be honest, I don't expect an 18 or 19-year-old to be able to ping the ball 70 yards over the top of a defence onto the foot of Ollie Watkins as he's coming over. So, we have to be realistic in what we expect when we look at these players, when we look at any player, I suppose, really. So it's not something that, I'm not saying that he can't get that into his game, but it's not something he's ever been tasked with doing, because this guy's a big, brutish, aggressive guy. And I go back to what I said there previously, that potentially you could be looking at some of these guys like Yashin Ozcan, an aggressive type defender. Like he gets on you like white on rice. For a 19-year-old, played a ton of football, and he really, really gets in your face, and he's not afraid to kick you up in the air if he needs to. A tough Turkish mentality, like we had with Alpe, is something that potentially we could have there. JAYDEE Canvot, from what I've seen from him previously, he's the exact same. I showed you guys a still shot because, unfortunately, I've got so many. I got a couple of strikes last year for using La Liga footage. Actually, it was in January for using La Liga footage for Andres Garcia, that I'm reticent to use any live footage again. So I do apologize for that. And I'll show it to you again, but I showed you at times he's able to get out of his defensive position, get into that midfield area and get really aggressive in his press towards a number 10 and get those tackles in. And he actually, I watched the game where he played against Montpellier, where he absolutely creases a fella. I mean, like, looking not to see the line for it, looking not to see a red card for it. But, this guy isn't afraid to use his body from an aggressive standpoint. So all those kind of things, I suppose, when we kind of look at what's the transfer strategy, what's the strategy with this backline. You want to get younger players in who have this innate ability, can obviously play football, can learn the game the way of the game from the two stalwart English centre halves that we have within the game, and obviously an international and Pau Torres. So I can see the meaningfulness behind that as well. Whether this comes off, I don't know. But a bit more about him. I'm just basically I've made a few notes in him here. Yeah, so he made 18 appearances last year, 12 starts, 6 as a substitute. He played 1,100 minutes. I'm just trying to dig out these from the last podcast that I did. So 7 of his appearances were as a centre back, 5 were as a central midfielder, a defensive midfielder. Now I'm skeptical on whether that is the case, given that there were times whereby Toulouse moved, and this is only from looking at statistical analysis. Obviously, I haven't looked at all 12 games of his, but when Toulouse moved from a back three to a back four mid-game, and he was more so kind of playing as an inverted right-sided centre-back. So I would take that. Like, if you're looking at this guy to come in here and be a defensive central midfielder, it could very well happen, but I'm skeptical as to whether, as to why, as to if that's what he's been brought in to play for Aston Villa for. Just don't think there's a need for Aston Villa, and I think his traits translate an awful lot more to that kind of ball playing centre half that we would have there. Very, very composed, very, very high passing accuracy and progressive metrics in the short and intermediate range, which I think suggests, the comfortability that we see in possession. And I have seen in those 4 games that he played. He aids in Toulouse's build up, specifically with passing into the pivot positions, being able to pass into that midfield, and being composed in that area. I don't think we need 3 or 4 centre halves that are able to ping the long ball like Pau Torres can or like Tyrone Mings can. We need the metronomic guys. We need people who are able to just pass it in safely and on target, in towards those 6 positions, or even out to our wing backs if we do go to a 3 at the back. That's worth its weight in gold too, and that's what that's what this guy has proven he can do on tape. And I would expect him to be able to do that, considering he's played in that defensive midfielder position previously. He's very solid tackle composition, very solid body composition when he's tackling outside the box. Inside the box, he does show a small bit of reticence, especially when people are running across him. For obvious reasons, he's an aggressive type player, doesn't want to be giving away penalties the whole time. To the best of my knowledge, he hasn't given away a penalty. I'm open to correction on that. I don't have his statistics open here, but there's one exact instance I'm going to show you in a moment whereby he allows the player ghost across him. The player does get his shot away. It does go wide. He learns from it the second time, gets his body position a bit better, is able to kind of shows him inside, as opposed to allowing the winger to make the decision for him, and then he gets the block on the shot. I'll show you that in a moment as well. Yeah, and as I said, this guy, like, his physical attributes just jump off the page for me. Plays in the back three as well. A lot of people will point to his aerial ability. When you watch him play, I don't have any concerns over his aerial ability. His aerial win rate is low, but then again, when you play as a third right back, or as the right centre half in a back three, the central centre half there is going to be the person who's going to be tasked with being the, I don't know what you call it, is the libero or whatever you call it within that back three, where he's going to be the guy who's going to try to get free, to get his head on stuff. So I'm expecting aerial duels to be lower for at least one of the guys in the back three. And it would make sense for the younger guy to have the lower, to not be tasked with going up, specifically when he's got the physical attributes that we have here. Obviously, there are some weaknesses as well to his game. Look, inexperience is a huge factor that we have to talk about. But the only way to get experience is to play football. Coming to Aston Villa, I think that I don't think he's going to be loaned out again. We've loaned too many people out at the moment. I think that we have to freshen up the squad, and this would be somebody that would come in to freshen up the squad. And as I mentioned as well, just from seeing it on footage, long range distribution, albeit in a small sample set, it's not the best. But then again, he hasn't been tasked with doing an awful lot. Can he learn it? I'm absolutely sure he can. Do I want him to learn it? We don't need everybody to be everything, specifically when they're a centre half. Why would you have decent midfielders or decent sixes who can play those defence splitting balls? I certainly I don't have to rely on my centre halves consistently playing those defence splitting balls. I much prefer to give it to the guys who can break the lines and then make things happen above. Because if you're relying on your centre halves all the time, well, then you're going to get stifled very, very, very easily. Yeah, I mentioned some of the games that he played there against on the 10th of May. This the return game against Lens. Played the full 90 minutes. Played in as a central defender, as that right-sided centre back. The game that I was most impressed with him was playing against away to Saint Etienne, where they won 3-2. Played the full 90 minutes again. Played at that right-sided centre-back, moved into midfield for a period of the game when they did go to a slightly more narrower 4 at the back. He moved into midfield to play as an inverted full-back. I don't expect him to play that for Unai Emery, because I just don't think Unai Emery really wants to play that type of formation, specifically if he goes to 3 at the back. But he does He did move in there, and as I say, he actually started off in that position and then went back into a more traditional right-sided centre-back in that game. It's in that game that I'll show you a still shot where he absolutely well, he doesn't buck the fella, but he chases a fella down, gets on him, shows his athleticism, doesn't let him wriggle out of it, and blankets him up the field in almost at the edge of the Saint-Étienne attacking third. So he blankets that player, shoots out of his position because he's given leeway to do so when he inverts in, and I thought that was impressive from him. But I'm talking about certain things that I've seen from him here. Let me share up some slides as I want to do. The last time I shared these slides, the heat map was incorrect because I'd taken it 2 days beforehand, and then magically SofaScore updated the heat map with the correct heat map. It's not often that I see issues on that site, but it's actually never. So this is his correct heat map here, and you can see it is predominantly on the right hand side. I did see against my mind has gone blank. I can't remember which team. It could have been against Brest, where he played quite a bit of the game. He moved over and played on that left hand side, or it could have been that he just popped up more there because they had gone into that narrower formation with him inverting into midfield into his position of that he's played previously of defensive midfielder. But here are his statistics again, as you guys may have seen before. He's 6'2.2 inches, right-footed. Happy birthday to him in 5 days' time when he turns 19. But looking here at his tackle rate, he's got quite a decent tackle rate, and you have to remember that when you play in a back three, you have more of a license to get more tackles in. Essentially, for good teams, you don't want your centre halves tackling that often. You want them intercepting, you want them blocking things. You don't want them going to ground and tackling because you're behind the 8 ball if that's the case. But or you're a team that's probably in the lower half of the league, as Toulouse were. But this guy was playing in the right-sided centre-back position, so his tackle rate is higher than the centre-halves that we can see at the moment. Good teams will protect their centre-backs, will have them blocking up space and dealing with things that they can deal with, stopping through balls, reacting to ball recoveries and stuff like that, and then being able to play that ball outwards again. But I like to see this. I like to see, you need to be able to see that when you're under pressure, you can make tackles. And he absolutely has been able to do that as well. Interception rate, again, we can see here is coming in higher than anybody else in the team. Once again, I've given reasons for that. Ball recoveries up there would have been the highest in our team last year. Again, they were under an awful lot more pressure, not a ball dominant team. So don't bite these statistics with as if they are the perfect microcosm of what this guy can do. It's obviously team specific as well, because when we look at certain areas here, his passes attempted is low because he's a younger player coming into a team, as I say, into a back three who has a passing centre back in there already, has a number 6 that can play the ball in there already. So he's not going to be tasked with that, an awful lot. And I don't mind that. I don't mind because it's very much so a case of you're going to need defenders to defend. You're going to need defenders to be good in certain areas, especially if you go to a back three. So they're just some of his statistics there, as I mentioned. A couple of people asked me the last time, and I was kind of, very much caught between two stools about whether he could play at right back. I don't think this guy is going to be a traditional right back at all. Here are his statistics with regards to how our right backs are currently at the moment. And we can see here that, yes, he stacks up pretty okay in some areas. He's down on Kanza's numbers in some areas. He's up on Kanza's numbers in other areas. But again, teams play different ways. So from a number statistic and from watching him, I don't think it would be the best use of resources putting him out at right back. But could Unai Emery put him out there as right back in that old tradition like we saw from a one fight? Nothing's beyond reproach, I suppose, from that point of view. So, look, that's a question. I suppose, can he play right back is a question for Unai Emery. But I think that somebody needs to be the heir apparent to Ezri Konsa within this backline, specifically being a right footer. So, somebody's going to have to like cross training somebody that's that young. Can absolutely be done. The best can do it. But coming to a new league, I would have him as the understudy for Ezri Konsa. If that's what the club do see him as. Here are some of the slides again, just for some of you that missed the last podcast we did in him here. Just some defensive positioning. This is a really interesting one, as I say again, against Saint-Etienne. Toulouse were 2-0 up at this stage. They did let the game slip and they came back and won 3-2. So they got to 2-2 and they came back and won 3-2. But what we can see here is that he's actually pulled in to be that central centre half. In this instance, they are playing 3 at the back here in this game. Comes in to be that central centre half. What he's doing here is obviously protecting that penalty spot is exactly what you want him to do. I will say that, the frivolity of youth and stuff like this, and it's a split-second moment, and obviously, he's not the finished article, but, scanning of the field in this instance here, because the ball, he does clear this ball here, but you can see that a man has a run on him. At no stage during this interaction did he look back to see where the man was coming from. Now, peripheral vision, peripheral hearing to hear somebody running towards that position is there, so does he need to turn around? Not necessarily, but the best guys scan the field. He did his job. He got the ball out of there and he saw the danger, pulled in from his right centre half position and got onto that penalty spot and cleared the danger. So good awareness and good defensive positioning from somebody so young. This is the situation where I mentioned that the left winger, actually, I think this guy was the left winger, gets into the box. He leaves him too much leeway. He gets his body position too open towards sending him down the line. And when the attacker jinks inside him, he's kind of left in, I won't say in no man's land, but he had to really rely on his athleticism here. He does get back at him. What we can see here is he does get back at him and he does corral him in towards the traffic, which was great to see. But he left him this. He gave him this open opportunity here, and if the winger had actually just shifted the ball slightly differently, actually that's a completely different slide there. I've got to add the other slide here. But when he does come in here, he still does go into traffic. He takes a shot. It goes out to that right hand side. The next slide here. Sorry, apologies. I got ahead of myself. I'm missing a slide there somehow. The next slide here shows how what he did in this instance. He got into that same position whereby he was getting attacked from that left hand side. This time he didn't leave himself too open to going down the wide channel. When the guy jinked in, he was in a much better position to come into this area, was able to get tighter to him and actually gets his foot on this and blocks this ball away. So the one-on-one defending, the positioning, or the awareness and the in-game learning in the space of time here. You look at the timestamp at the top here, 51:53, 14 minutes later. He was able to make that adjustment in game, not give the person that opportunity, and this instant gets that block away. And I like to see that. I really do. I like to see that he didn't let the first one phase him, albeit nothing came from it. Didn't let it phase him, just got back up on the horse and worked on his craft again, even though it was in game. Covering speed again. If you guys have watched the last one, I discussed this one at length. He was in a pretty elevated position here, and he made an absolute lung buster of a run back here. Gets it was just a long, hopeful ball from Brest, but he gets the tackle in here and puts it out for a corner, gets up, gives the fist pump, does everything that you'd expect somebody to do in an instance like that. And then lastly, this is the aggressive piece that I mentioned. Once again, going back to that Toulouse Saint-Etienne game, in the very first minute, being tasked with being out in that right centre-back position, but obviously given the opportunity to tuck inside. He did tuck inside, followed the number 10 here that was trying to get on the ball in the first minute, absolutely blankets him here, gets a foot in and clears that ball away. So while these are only just snapshots of what he can do and what I've seen him do in these games, I don't have the snapshot of him standing over the guy for Montpellier when he absolutely buckles him into oblivion. The guy was all right afterwards, but it was some cruncher of a tackle. I don't have that screenshot, but go look for it. As I say, but he's a fully formed human being in a lot of instances. He's got really, really good athletic traits. He does have his obviously learning points that he needs to work on as a young player, but an interesting player, albeit somebody of youthful years. I'm going to come to some of your comments here as well, guys, just before I finish this one up. First of all, British Mick says, let's go, not one for gloating, but my speculation 2 years ago that Monchi and Unai's remit was different to what the fans believed seems to be coming to fruition. That being acquisition of youth to negate spending and build for the future. It's clear in many ways. Firstly, the acquisitions for themselves and a shrewd business on buying to loan them back to their parent clubs and loans in general. Also, our reluctance to sell whilst instead letting them improve at other clubs as we can't afford them the game time they need up the Villa. Yeah, look, I know it can be very, very frustrating for people when they see loans. I have a new hypothesis on that as well, that loaning a player out on a year-to-year basis is every bit as profitable to you as selling a player. Obviously, you don't get the double whammy of getting the money for the player onto your balance sheet. But loaning a player out in the SCR era obviously reduces the wage input that you have there, absolutely negates it completely altogether. So it does give you a positive on an SCR point of view, more so than it would give you a positive on the PSR point of view. So I think we're just playing in two different battlegrounds now at the moment. That SCR being done in and I'm open to correction on this if anybody's more insight in this, but SCR being done almost on a year-to-year basis as opposed to PSR being done on a 3-yearly basis. And I know there's idiosyncrasies. It's not as simple as that. But getting those wages off for 1 year to hit your percentage limits is still good business, albeit it's not the best business, but perfect in being the enemy of the good and all that kind of stuff. But I agree with you, British Mick. We're not in a position to go and buy fully fledged, incredible young players at every single position that can come right into the team. We're not in a position to go buy Rodrigo's, Florian Wirtz, to buy after the season he had last year, to buy Huysen, to buy, all those guys, Zabarnia. We're not in a position to go and buy those guys because of their cost and because of the other teams that are interested in them, as much now as it pays me to say that. So taking flyers on people for 5-6 million, loaning them out, continuing their development at the moment. If they're good enough, they come back. If they're not, we're sending them on for 50% or 20% or 30% extra. From a monetary point of view, it's still crumbs off the table, but it's still good crumbs that we need to be producing as a club. So yes, look, it's not what a lot of fans want to hear, but it's a reality of the situation, I think, as well. Where are we? Oh, class. You can repost this stream. I don't know how you can do that, but it's Xanx. Well done, James. Thanks a million for that. David Dyer says straight out on loan, I suppose. I look, you could. I don't know is the answer here, but at some stage we have to keep some of the players that we buy. At some stage we have to keep some of the players that we buy, and we need a centre half. So I don't see this one being a straight out on loan. I think our players that we have out on loan currently, being that guy Cisse, being Nedeljkovic, we won't be loaning out everybody we sign. And just because he's a younger player, you could be right. I don't know. As I say, anybody who says that they know for certain here, unless they hear it from the horse's mouth, Unai Emery is just guessing and just plucking at straws. But I would imagine if you're going to spend 20 million on a player, you're not going to loan him out. And that 20 million hasn't been accepted yet. If that is the bid number, it's the rumored bid number. It hasn't been accepted yet. So I think if you're spending that amount of money, you're holding on to him. The other guys that we've spent money on previously, Nedeljkovic, what was it, 6-8 million? He was loaned out. Was Cisse 5 million? He was loaned out. Dobbin was nothing. Was a low amount of money, I suppose, comparatively. It was a weird transfer anyway, loaned out. So yeah. So I won't draw any direct comparisons, but I also won't draw any inference, I suppose, from his age or from his relative lack of experience either. Andy Villa says, anything to be said for not buying all these maybe players for the future and saving our money for actually improving our first 11? I think that there is money in the kitty to buy players that are in the attacking side of the ball. I think that they're waiting for opportunity cost there. I think that they're waiting for the market to simmer down. Like, it's very much a case of, not every team has unlimited finances. And Villa included, obviously, don't have unlimited finances. But I don't think this is about Villa's. I think this is about Villa waiting to see what happens. Sunderland are spending money like drunken sailors to stay up. Leeds are going to spend money. It happens nearly every year now. The teams that come up are going to spend 100 to 140, 150, 160 million. we're not in a position to do that this year, but we are in a position to, like, not every single player is going to be sold to another team this year. There is always going to be another player out there that will improve our first team. We always get the rabbit out of the hat that we never expected. Like last year, we had Ian Matson, didn't play an awful lot. He's a guy who's was brought in, didn't play an awful lot. I imagine he's going to be someone who's going to improve our first team this year. Amadou Nana and so on. But I think there's another striker that's going to drop at some stage. Don't know what age he'll be, don't know what profile he'll be or anything. But I would imagine you don't go into another year with that situation. And if it does, well, then we've got Daniel Mallon as well, somebody we've bought previously. So you could make the argument that Onana, Matson, Mallon were all players that were purchased last year with a view to us not being as frivolous in the transfer market this year, albeit I do think that we will have one or two more attacking options coming, because we just need to replace some of the players that we didn't have, that we've lost in Asensio and Marcus Rashford. I think we need to replace those guys. So, but I think that the money has been saved for, like, the for today purchases are going to be in the attacking side of things. And a lot of players, like, I don't know if I fully agree with this myself, but they might be happy with who they have in defense. Might feel that they're able to work around what they have in defense, especially if they change their tactics, if there's a tactical change. So bringing in younger guys for the next 12 months to learn within Premier League football, like Ashkan, like this guy, that might be the strategy. That might be the strategy. But I completely agree with you. You know, this is a transfer podcast. Essentially, we love transfers. So the more established entities that we're linked with, the more we can look at how the team is going to build up in future. But realistically speaking, when you get somebody who's played 18 games and he comes in, there isn't an awful lot to talk about. I try and watch as much of him as I can. I'm going to try and watch another 2 or 3 games of his to get a more rounded view of him. But I think I've got it fairly right at the moment. And he's got very, very much so got really good physical skills. He's decent on the ball. And if they are looking to go into a back three, potentially he could be an understudy at right side at centre half. He's been linked, and not by me, been likened, should I say, and not by me. It's been likened to 2 separate players. And I know likings and comparisons are often hyperbolic. I completely understand that. But Ibrahima Konate was one, and Castello-Lekegba was another person. And if he turns out even remotely like either of those 2 players, we'll be bloody delighted, I think, because both of those players are 2 top. They're really, really good players. Where are we? Yeah, the Claron Blue Witch says that Canvot, Oscan and CCL played in the back three at their previous clubs. Yeah, as I say, what inference we can draw to that, I'm not quite sure, but they're young players, they're athletic players, and they're players that I think can be molded, I think, from that point of view. Richard Laws says, we play back three against Tottenham. We got destroyed. I have my concerns. There's a wholly different aspect to playing a back three to playing a back four on a Sunday. And I don't know when the Spurs game was, but let's just put this out there. You play a back four, and we did it against Palace as well and got destroyed. But you play a back four on a Sunday, you play a back three on a Wednesday. There's only one day, essentially. There's only half a day to implement that properly. There's a whole difference then between implementing that over a full off season. I still don't think we go to a back three. I think we see a back four this season, but I'm open to seeing it. I'm open to seeing it with a full off season of implementation, because it's very difficult to implement a whole new game plan in the space of 2 days. And that's just my context towards it. You're not wrong. That's just my context towards it as well. Where else are we? And Marine Boy, Malin didn't start any games and barely gets on as a sub. Then all of a sudden he's going to be our number 9. Malin's a proven entity, you know, as a right winger. I don't think he's going to be our number 9, but I think Ollie Watkins is going to be our number 9. You know, I think he deserves to be our number 9. I think Malin will probably be a right winger, and he will probably be an auxiliary 9 if needed. I do obviously think there's another shoe to drop in that area. Where it drops, I don't know. Or maybe it might be a case that they haven't seen him improve enough, but I just don't see him being moved out. But the fact that we didn't see an awful lot of him last year, past isn't prologue either in that instance. You you know, if we only see him coming off the bench for 7-8 minutes a game in the first 15 games of the season, well, then we can say, yeah, he's not fitting in here. Then we can make a proper determination on him. Context, I suppose, around him from last season was Rashford was doing the business, Asensio was doing the business at the start, and you know, he still managed to score. I think it was 3 goals last season, Manlin coming off the bench. He can definitely consider himself hard done by last year, though, for sure. I think that is for 100% sure. Damien asks, how does he compare to Bogard? Different physical stature to Lamar Bogard. I to be honest with you, the difference between Bogard, I think, is Bogard is a lot more kind of a lot more assured of, like, this guy's aggression runs through his body, Canvot, and I don't say that in a bad way. I think that should be embraced as a positive. Bogard is a lot more timid in certain aspects. He's a lot more of a footballer, and I think that's probably where they differ from that point of view. I think Bogard in his heart of hearts wants to play central midfield. I think this fella in his heart of hearts wants to play centre half. So I think that's probably the difference between the two of them. But once again, I've 18 matches of this guy to look at. And I've only looked at 4 of them. With regards to Bogard, probably only about 18 matches of Bogard to watch as well. So neither of the two of them are the finished article for sure. Neither of the two of them are the finished article. I'm going to scroll down to small because I feel that some. Stephen O'Sullivan asks, Neil, love the pod, watching from Sydney. Oh, thanks, Stephen, for checking in from Sydney. Was Ferguson a missed opportunity? I hope so. From an Irish point of view, I hope every team missed on Ferguson and Evan Ferguson. I just think I think the deal is something along the line of a loan with an obligation to buy for 40 million, and it's just, I think more so for Evan Ferguson. I'm hoping that everything goes right for him in Roma. The deal with West Ham was absolutely horrible. It's hard for me to talk about missed opportunities in Evan Ferguson because I you know, he's the one shining light for me that I really want to improve for this Irish team, considering that I really want to fall back in love with the Irish national team again. And somebody like Evan Ferguson on absolute top fire, getting into his 21, 22, 23, 24 years where you're going to really see him build and become a goal scorer, hopefully. That's what I want to happen. So I hope it's been a missed opportunity from that point of view. But obviously, I don't know where the financials came on that one. Cool. Yeah, so listen, I think I'm going to leave it at that, guys, because we might be back later on. I'm trying to get something going for something maybe later on as well, where I have other people's opinions, which would be great. But thanks a million, everybody, for nearly 800 people joining me here at for an unannounced podcast on a Thursday, a work day. So thanks a million for everyone for that. As I say, I don't have all the news with regards to this. Only telling you guys what I see with this guy. I know he's not going to float everybody's boat, but I suppose really all I want to do is live in a world of context, and that's, I'm fully aware that other people may not appreciate that, but that's absolutely fine too. I'll never tell anybody how to be a fan of any of the club that they love. But as I say, it's movement is movement. You know, movement inwards. If this guy does come in and is a player that we do sign, I think we need to give. For me, I will always give them time to see what comes from it. So thanks everybody for joining me today. We will see you potentially later on. If not, I'll be back again tomorrow. And yeah, have a great day. Have a great Thursday. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. And all that's left to say is up the